Hey, good morning. Welcome to the New Breed of Business. I'm here with fellow new breeders, and we are talking today about the stock market. What's going on in the U.S. stock market? The markets have dropped post the election. The markets went up when President Trump was elected, and now they have gone down a correction amount, which is 10% technically down and more. The Nasdaq is down a little further. So what's happening now? We know there are a bunch of elements involved. Short term, there's the whole tariff uncertainty, right? So that's clearly an issue. But some other things have surfaced. Other things like, is this AI valuation jump where all these companies, private especially, but also public, are getting these incredible valuations based on the future hope of what AI will do. And people are now saying, this smells a little bit like the internet bubble of 2000. So we're going to talk about that. Is it a bubble? Is AI and its valuations a bubble? You may remember a company by the name of DeepSeek, which is Chinese. They came out and basically said, hey, we've done everything that these other AI engines have with a lot less computer power. In fact, it's Chinese, so they could use Chinese chips instead of the NVIDIA chips. That crushed NVIDIA's stock price. And it just sort of highlights, well, wow, there's a lot of speculation, a lot of froth in these valuations. Then finally, we have the longer term, broader based issues, which have to do with indebtedness, the liquidity of the currency markets, the global situation with war, and how BRICS factors into that in terms of currency versus the US dollar. And then we contrast all of this to what we feel like the Lord is saying about such things over the longer term. And for that, I direct you towards some of the discussions we've had in the past about Watch Japan. There is this model of what happened in the financial crisis of 2007 and 8, and we're following the same patterns. And that originally got kicked off in Japan with a market disruption. We had a similar event last August, if you recall. The markets dropped even further, I think, maybe than they have right now, or maybe a similar amount. And that had to do with all sorts of covering of bets and automated trading and hedged uh, carry trades that exist in currency. So just watch that space and you can check out that information. We'll put it in the chat and we'll put it in the links that are associated with this discussion. So welcome everybody. How to my dad? Got Eric and Nancy and Jackie and others. If you're watching this, hope you get something out of it for eternity's sake. I was just talking to a group of business people last night about the focus of eternity, even in our daily lives. When we think about markets, we often think about our provision, our savings, like how will our future be funded? But when we look at the eternal plane, it's not as relevant as culture makes it out to be. Like we're very much a money culture, especially in the United States, but all over the world. And is taught to people as the lifeblood. But we know that Jesus is the true life. He is the way, the truth, and the life. Apart from him, we can do nothing. That's the scripture. And then practically, is he not trustworthy to provide for he and the church family? And so that'll be part of the discussion here. We look to Acts. Remember when people were led by the Spirit to sell valuable things like lands in order to fund the kingdom? Well, one of the things we're going to talk about too is like if I'm wanting to take some money off the table out of the stock market or any financial product, what are my alternatives? What do I do? And we look to that Acts model for how they put the proceeds of that at the church leaders' feet, the apostles' feet. And then they were able to use that for the kingdom mission at hand, which included living life. If you remember, the poor were served, the needy, everyone had what they needed according to that model. So we've gotten away from that in the modern day, but look, Jesus is coming back. He's coming back soon. And how soon is anyone's guess. We don't know the day or the hour, but the signs of his coming are here. God said he will have a bride without spot or wrinkle. So we're going to talk about all that today. We have a vision called the Storehouse Vision, which is a way to deploy assets like that Axe model, where you and your local community can invest back in people, in businesses, and even in other development, like land development ideas of things, including working together. There's this concept in the Bible called the storehouse. Bring the whole tithes into the storehouse. Today, a lot of tithes end up going to just fund operations of churches and ministries that are fragmented. So part of the storehouse vision is to have a river of resource, not just money, but a way of trusting God to see the kingdom come in a unity context where across denominations, across churches, across ministries, we could see the kingdom come. And that's more like the Acts model. So that's part of it too. Anyway, back to the markets. Who would like to weigh in with their question or perspective? There's a lot of forces that are going on. We put some articles in the write up about what's happening. I've mentioned some of them. There's other dynamics that are going on. Um, what do you think about these markets? And a lot of people, a lot of Christians are coming to me, Greg, what's going on? Why is the market dropping like this? And there's reasons we can give, but also there's that longer term perspective. Like, will this golden calf money making machine always just go up and up and up and up? That implies a perspective on what the markets are doing, more of a eternal perspective. And one last thing to share about that, and you can go back and take a look at some of our other materials, is during the last financial crisis, I really felt like the Lord was saying, this is not the end of it. It's more like the beginning of it, meaning there are more waves of market trouble ahead. So I, for one, don't believe in the perpetual motion machine of the markets will always go higher. I know our entire retirement structure is based on that thought, and even how we look at our modern economy. But all we have to do is look back at Rome and look at history and realize that kingdoms do not last forever if it's not the kingdom of God. They can be mighty on the face of the earth like Egypt was, and then one day it amounts to nothing. So just keeping that eternal perspective in mind, I think, is always valuable, and looking for what God is saying about such things. So, what do you guys think? What do you think's going on in the markets? What say you? Hey, Dad, you're muted from the top. There you go.
Okay, can you hear me now?
We got you.
Right. Historically, and Greg knows better than I do, markets have always corrected, and sometimes they correct more severely. And we have a situation where, yes, President Trump got elected, but he made a lot of promises. And you got to remember that 48, 49% of the population did not vote for him. They voted for the people on the left. And so what you have for the last, what is it now, 9 weeks, 10 weeks since the election,
Yep.
um, you've had the media and the press, oh, tariffs, 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 tariffs are going to raise prices, tariffs are going to do this, tariffs is going to destroy the world. So there's been a bombardment, of the tariff problem. Well, that's just one part of it. The markets were overvalued. Some of the stocks, the AI thing, which you mentioned, AI is going to be great, and I think it has a great future, but it's not, the rocket ship that everybody thought it would be. And so there's been a correction. And when the Chinese, with their inexpensive, although from what I've read, they were still using NVIDIA chips. They were just older NVIDIA chips. But in any case, yeah, they've got some smart people over there, and they may be able to, do some kind of AI on the cheap. But there's still going to be a tremendous investment in AI in this country. And but that'll take a while to work its way through the system. So I don't think there's anything unusual going on here. And it's also because there's been such, as I just said previously, this negative media blitz against the Trump administration and Doge.
Right. Well, I think that is a valid perspective that in the short term, market's correct. It's part of the fear and greed that drives things. And there's this volatility of, oh boy, we better protect ourselves. Let's sell. Oh, we can't miss out on that upside. Let's get in. So that's common. It's a part of how the markets work. I do want to bring up this chart, which we're going to have in the write up here. This is a 100-year chart of effectively an adjusted price earnings ratio. What is that? Well, price earnings is stock price versus forward-looking earnings. This happens to be corrected for inflation. This is a PE or price earnings ratio. And if you look at this chart, if we drew a line in the middle, it might be at a value of 20 price to earnings. And currently it's around 36. So the markets are historically very high in valuation. And part of the explanation for that is the technology of AI and its potential for productivity gains. However, we also know that such valuations don't last. And so if this is at a peak, it also is a potential warning to watch out. We could have a drop. So I think this is all valid. I was going to share, even though long term, I think the markets are going to go through a lot of downturn. And I think it's a warning to people, like, be careful. If you stay in the markets too long, you may lose all or some. But in the shorter term, I think I would say, like, it could go up as much as it could go down in the shorter term. And I think we just what we're doing is we're sort of looking out there and saying, is it another opportunity to take some gains off the table and reinvest it in some other things? So that's part of the conversation. So anyone else want to chime in, weigh in? Maybe the Lord has shown you something about the markets. Maybe the Lord has shown you, what some of these alternatives are. What do you think? Eric, you want to go for it?
Sure. So, what I've been trained on technical analysis. And so, you've got this fundamentals conversation that you're having, and then you've also got the technicals. And so, in trading the markets, you have you have your body of investors who are looking at the fundamentals, and then you have the body of investors who are looking at the technicals and kind of everything in between. Would you agree with that, Greg?
Totally. Yeah, we didn't get into that, but that's a good point.
Um,
Market followers will trade on the technicals. You get moving averages. When things go below a certain threshold, it could trigger further downs or ups. So go ahead.
so what I'll do is I will share my, oh, can you let me share my screen?
Yes, hold on. Go for it.
Okay, I'm on my phone, so it's not my computer, but I think I can still do this. So I'm just gonna share my screen, and I'm gonna go over to my Trading View account, which is a stock, as a stock analysis.
Here it is.
Right. So here we are. We're looking at the Nasdaq 100, and these red lines that you see are lines that I've drawn for technical analysis purposes. So,
Sometimes spoken about as a channel.
yes. And so one of the key technical analysis strategies is called trend analysis, and something we call the line of change. And so the line of when the market crosses the line of a line of change, it typically signals, I mean, almost always signals to technical investors there is now a change in direction of the long-term trend. And so I've been watching this. So if we were to go kind of over here, right in here on the left side of the screen, we're looking at 2023. There was kind of the start of a bullish market. I mean, it's been a bullish market for a while, but there was a big correction, and then it kind of another channel got created. So we've been in a 2-year bullish market inside of a channel. If you see this red channel, well, that channel that line of change just crossed back here in kind of in February, March. We're at each of these candles represents 1 week of time. And so when the market opens underneath or above the channel, that tells the rest of the market, hey, like, really pay attention. This is not a little correction. This is a big correction. And what it usually means is that now the market is now moving inside of the next channel, which was established here on this other bottom red line. And so anyway, so all that to say that technical traders are basically looking at this market as with the likelihood or potential of going down 30%.
Which is called a breakout. If you break out of the channel, it could be a down leg in this case because it broke out to the negative.
Yep. So I mean, I haven't really been paying attention too much, but my guess is like, if I was, without even literally listening to a single piece of news, my guess is that a lot of technical traders are expecting it to go, the NASDAQ 100 to go down between 15 and 16,000, which is a significant correction. 10% is one thing, but 30% is a whole nother thing. So anyway, that's just a comment, of, yes, in the short term, it's likely that we are looking at a significant correction simply from a technicals perspective without looking at any of these other fundamentals that you talk about.
Thank you. That's great insight to share with people about how people trade. And again, this is the NASDAQ 100, which is the NASDAQ Composite Index. It's roughly around 20,000. And included in that would be companies like Tesla. So Tesla, for example, is valued currently still at a very historically high level, even though the stock has dropped 50% or 40%. So that goes back to the other side, which is a fundamental analysis. But this is a kind of a breakout direction. I think what you're saying, Eric, is like there could be a downside of maybe 30%.
Yeah, that's what the technicals say. It's not law, but it's historically is incredibly accurate. And so, the S&P 500, exact same thing. The Dow Jones, I haven't actually done that one, but I'm pretty sure you'd see something similar. So yeah, thanks for letting me share.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great insight. Anybody have any question about that or anything else, or a point or a perspective they'd like to share? Any eternal perspective that people would like to share? Jackie, do you mind if I call on you? Do you have what's your perspective on all this? Jackie, are you there?
Yes, Greg, I'm sorry.
Hey.
I'm outside in my garden and I was watering, so I didn't have my phone with me. Um, hmm. Well, when you first asked the question, I just scared immediately market correction, as your dad said. That was the first thing that came to me. What I saw from, or what I heard from Eric, I wasn't really looking because I was away from my phone. Is very interesting. And you asked about eternity, and
Yeah, the
well,
eternal
the Lord is correcting a lot of the stuff. Um, this is not going to be eternal. the way business are being run right now. So I think it has to do with him a lot and the changes that are coming, and maybe a warning to prepare ourselves to that we cannot continue doing business as usual, specifically those of us that understand what is going on and knowing that, the Lord is preparing his way to come. I mean, we're preparing his way to come back. So things are going to change. And yeah, as you mentioned also, we have Egypt, we have Roman Empire, and all these empires have fallen. So I
Right.
think this is another sign of changes
Well,
that
let's
are
let's dig
coming.
let's dig into that eternal perspective for a moment, right? Shall we? I mean, a lot of people disagree with my perspective that these markets are driven by fear and greed. Fear and greed are not emotions from heaven. They're really sins, like to fear for our lives, for our safety, for our security. Greed, we want more. A lot of those things and trust in money. Jesus was very clear. You got to choose. You either trust me or trust in money. You can't try to do both. You can't serve money and serve me. So I think the thing we've got to be real about is, like, are some of these examples of the history, even in the Bible, of where countries are judged, nations are judged, not only for sexual immorality or shedding of innocent blood and injustices, but also the injustice of greed, where we concentrate wealth, we exploit the poor to profit for the few, and that is a popular notion in capitalism. Like, hey, look, capital demands a return, and if you put your capital to work, you deserve it. You worked hard, you get this return. But God's perspective is different than that, I would contend. And in fact, he judged Sodom and Gomorrah not just for their sexual immorality, but it says in Ezekiel, he judged them for their pride and for their greed and for their lack of sensitivity of helping people, really, even in the aspect of day-to-day life and their business dealings. So let's have a look at this for the moment. Um, I'm just going to read this, and maybe anyone else can chime in. But I've got 5 examples in the Bible here in the write-up. There's Sodom, I just mentioned. Then there was Tyre. Then there was Egypt. And of course, then there was Israel. And if God judged his own people, how much more would he judge another nation? And then we have the end times global Babylon, which you could argue we are entering into those times, and what God has to say. So I'm just going to read some of these scriptures and you can check them out. Ezekiel 29, verse 2 about Egypt says, "Behold, I'm against you, Pharaoh, king of Egypt. You said, my river is my own. I have made it for myself. I will bring you up out of the midst of your rivers, leave you in the wilderness, you and the fish of your rivers. You shall fall in the open field. I've given you as food to the beasts of the field and the birds of the heavens." So why? Why did God judge Egypt and Pharaoh? Because Pharaoh made himself like a god. Egypt thought, we have developed this amazing system of economy and commerce in the Nile River Delta. It's ours. We did it. So you can see there's a pride. We did it. It's, we're the ones who should receive the accolades for our strength and what we've done here. And of course, that was judged by what God was saying. He was saying, look, even to Israel, you have been a false hope. And so this sort of shows us that when Israel depended on Egypt to get them out of trouble, whether it was against Babylon or the Assyrians, God is saying, look, you've been a staff of a reed to the house of Israel. You broke and tore their shoulders. When they leaned on you, you broke their back. So God is saying, when we turn to control and pride and the natural strength, and how we get credit for how great our nation is, how great America is, watch out, because that is a sure warning that a country will be. So there's these other examples in here of Israel, Tyre. But before I go into that, does anybody want to respond to what we're discussing along those lines?
I do, Greg, because I think you are going in the right direction. We see there is a lot of greed, like, and it has to do with Israel also. Israel is still captive by following the other nations and just depending on other nations to do things instead of depending on God and trusting Him. And in the case of the United States, I hear President Trump, we're going to make America great again. And, on the one side, we're helping Israel. And, if you help Israel, you're going to be blessed. We know that. But on the other side, we don't understand the biblical narrative. And I'm really concerned about that. Like, I don't know if you saw how many billions of dollars in weapons he wants to sell to Qatar. And Qatar is the biggest enemy. They have funded Hamas and Hezbollah and all these terrorist groups, and now Trump is happy to sell them all kind of weapons to destroy Israel. So it's like, what is going on? And it's like, yeah, all this money and it's all this greed stuff. So it's all about money, and,
Right.
or making Gaza like a tourist destination. Well, Gaza belongs to Israel. So that's very concerning, because when you deal with Israel and the land of Israel, it's very serious stuff, serious. And on the other hand, as I said, Israel is still very dependent on, should I attack, whatever? And it's always asking the United States, can I do this? Can I do this? And that's not what the Lord told them. The Lord said, you are different. You cannot assimilate to the other nations. They have to look up to you and become like you, but they are not doing it. So I totally agree with that perspective that you just presented.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, because I think what you're getting into is we have had a perspective when President Trump has initiated a lot of these diplomatic initiatives to try to bring peace. He's trying to bring a peace and a prosperity in that message. When he has gone to North Korea, that was the message. Hey, if you work together with us and have peace with South Korea, we will make you prosperous. If you put away your nuclear weapons, we'll teach you how to be like Americans and make incredible money. You will have, it's spoken of like the Gaza Strip will be the French Riviera of the Mediterranean uh, on the eastern shores. So it's this message of America is great, our money is great, we're the most prosperous, powerful nation in the world. You want to be like us. Now, that's not a message of you want to be like us in terms of our alignment with Jesus. That's a message of, hey, we really have something going here. And if you want what we've got, work together with us and we'll do some trading back and forth to see that accomplished. You're seeing that with Saudi Arabia. You're seeing that with North Korea, with Russia to some extent. So this is interesting, right? Because this is an unprecedented time. But the question for us is that God or is that the pride of man? And so I think that's an open question that we can all think about, pray about, and have understanding. But when it comes to the markets and the might of America, it's a little bit scary to look at these contrasts of how did Tyre act? How did Egypt act? How did Israel act? Were they proud of where the station they at? Sometimes the biggest risks to a nation were that they were just prospering incredibly right before a fall and a judgment. So that's, I think, part of the open conversation we're having today. I wanted to welcome everybody else. We've been talking about the stock market, what's going on with this downturn. Is there more to it, or is it going to rebound? We've had a technical analysis that Eric presented. We've had fundamental analysis that we've discussed. Anybody else want to share or weigh in or ask a question?
Greg, I'll ask a question.
Yeah, go for it, man.
Historically, it's been the church's responsibility to, for lack of better terms, fund the global mission of evangelism and advancing kingdom work. The Western church specifically has been a key driver in donating to that cause. How do you see that potentially affecting a downturn like this affecting the giving and donation? Like, do you think that the church will become more generous as they realize they need to invest their money in a different direction, which is where you're pointing at? Or do you think it's going to cause a kind of a constriction of funds as people feel less liquid and all that? I mean, I've heard there's several $trillion of quote unquote Christian money tied up in the stock market, right? So if you Christian owned money, right? So if the stock market goes down 30%, you're talking about $1 trillion that could have gone towards funding missions and kingdom work that's just evaporated.
Right. Great question, right? Which is, the generosity of the West is well known, and even the Western nations have done a lot in terms of sending out missionaries. Like in the US, it was less in the beginning about funding. It was more the student volunteer movement in the 1800s, the haystack revivals. We were sending out missionaries who knew they were going to potentially die. We trained up, mutually encouraged, and sent them forth. In the later day, that's become more and more missionary organizations are sending people out, and then people who are believers can fund that. They can invest in it by giving gifts. And that's certainly a very important thing. However, if everything that can be shaken is going to be shaken in the days ahead, where does that position the church if we are more invested than we ought to be in those markets or in those currencies? Will we still be sending out missionaries? Will we still be doing the work of God, or will we have to recalibrate? There is a really interesting white paper that I can put here in the chat that I would ask you to check out. And in the white paper, it discusses this very possibility. So sorry, I was just dealing with a Zoom issue. If the markets have trouble, if people lose their wealth, markets or otherwise, will they continue to be generous in the ways of working to see the kingdom come? Or will we have to recalibrate ourselves to really be in a place where we're not dependent on our money or our markets, but we're truly trusting and depending on God to resource everything? So one of the things we're encouraging our ministries and Christians to look at that and to have faith for when Jesus was on the earth, he would send people out even without money. Remember when Jesus sent out the disciples 2 by 2? He specifically said, don't go with a money belt. So what he's talking about there is learn how to trust God for the supernatural provision, to believe in his favor, and in his favor, we can activate many other things. And so it's about weaning ourselves off of mammon as our only way of supplying certain things in resourcing ministries and into more of a kingdom dynamic, which does not depend on the markets. It does not depend on a currency of a country. It really just depends on trusting in God. So I'm going to put that in the chat, which will be in the write up. This white paper, it's 12 pages. Have a read. It talks about how, like, will the funding dry up if the markets go down for global mission as well as the church and the kingdom? And if it does, what will ministries do? How will they respond? It's putting out there that question. So thank you for the question, Eric, and hopefully that addresses a little bit of it. But yeah, I believe for one, we're going to have to reinvent ourselves. We're going to have to rediscover even the anointing of the book of Acts and Jesus's day of having resources supplied even from heaven and not just depend on money only.
You know, uh, I think that we're in a situation where where we've learned a lot of things over the last few years, and we have to take what we've learned and apply it to the situations that we're in. And I think there are fundamental changes going on. We see them going on in the US, but not just here, in many nations across the earth. We're seeing things that governments would have never done a few years ago, but starting to do today. It's happening over there in uh, Argentina. It's happening here. It's happening in a number of different places. But here's the thing that you have to balance. And everything we're doing, we're always balancing between what is what is the kingdom operation or the kingdom of order of something, and how much should we engage in the world's systems and how much should we not. And so the unfortunate thing about global markets is they are so manipulated. I used to think there were financial absolutes, and I've come to realize there are no financial absolutes. There's only one absolute, and that's scripture. And
Yep.
so understanding that the market should have been doing things that they didn't do and shouldn't have been doing things that they are doing, then how can you invest in something that's being manipulated the way our markets have been and our science have been, our history has been, our so many things in our society has been. So what I'm looking at is shifting the way I look at investing in well, investing as a whole, but also investing in a kingdom manner. And instead of investing in markets, which are being manipulated and I really have no control over, I'm going to invest in the kingdom where I've been planted. I'm going to invest in the business and the believers, businesses in my area. And one of the things that, we've started doing is, we bought a hyperbaric chamber for a medical massage group, and we made 15% for 3 years, and then they purchased the item and we got paid back. And the stability of that is, one, I'm investing right in the community. I'm giving them money to get something they need. I'm participating in their building up of their business, and they paid me according. Sometimes I got more than 15, sometimes I got less, but it actually worked out better. But they ended up with an asset to their business. I did the same thing with somebody who was a welder, who they worked for a welding company, but they were making almost as much money on the side working for themselves, but they needed a welder. So we invested $10,000 in a welder. So that concept of investing in your grassroots, the place God's planted you around, the place you've been planted by God, and looking, or, sometimes it just lands in your lap, people who need assistance. Well, now you're getting assistance from other believers. You're investing in other believers, and you're investing in something that's tangible, something that's real, something that you can kick the tires and wrap your arms around it. So I think that as investment in currency and digital versus physical currency, so many things are changing around the world. I've kind of looked at saying, what can I do here? I'm not living here by accident. I've been planted here by God. And how can I help this area where God has put me? And so it's a different way of looking at things. And quite frankly, it's the opposite end of the continuum of investing in a mutual fund. You're investing in something else, but you're also investing in something that has tangible proven character credibility. So those are my thoughts.
All right, those are some good thoughts, Fulton. I think you might be with the ICCC, so welcome. The the thing that Fulton's talking about is it really embodied, we call it the storehouse vision. It's really a biblical way of thinking about investing. So a lot more to share on that, but just generally speaking, what Fulton's talking about, I think, is really important and is a way forward, which is to say, hey, instead of investing in this black box that makes us this money, and it's now more and more automated, and we have no idea how it's being manipulated. Markets go up, they go down, people profit from that volatility, people profit from a lot of different things. So why not take something out of that and put it into a local business, a local opportunity, especially amongst Christians and community? And I think that is absolutely correct. It's like when we invest in things that we're positioned with, what we're doing is we're reintegrating who we are and where we live into how do we invest. And this is part of God's covenant. I'm convinced this is part of his plan. That the opposite is happening globally around the world right now, where money is becoming separated from people and it's purely driven through trading or otherwise into profitability or losses, but it's separating itself from the people. God is saying, I love people, and that's why I love business, because I want to see people working together with other people. And then if we have someone who's like a welder, like you're saying, and they don't have good access to credit, but yet they need a piece of equipment to grow and build their business, how can they do it? Well, we can work together with them in relationship. And furthermore, that we do that in a biblical style. So we're not lording it over them and using leverage to protect ourselves or get an exorbitant return or what have you. If we look at the biblical example of how to invest like that, it's different. It's different in that we want to share in the reward, but we don't want to hamstring or hamper one another if we win or lose, because it's not about winning or losing or, hey, I get, I take what's mine. It's about we're working together. We trust God together. Let's do it so it's an opportunity. You could think of it as when you lend inside of your own nuclear family. If you want to help a child or so forth, do you do it as a creditor would? Do you do it as a money lender would or a bank? No, you treat it differently. You work together with them, and if there's an issue that crops up, there's a way of handling that with God's grace and his favor. And this exemplifies this idea of moving back to what Fulton was saying of tangible assets, things that are not just paper based. Our whole financial markets globally trade on what would be called paper based value. I have a company, it's a stock certificate, and it's worth what people think it's worth on a piece of paper. I have a bond in a country's debt, and it's worth what this piece of paper tells me it's worth, and people are willing to pay for it. When we take resources out of that system or those systems and put it into our neighbors, our local businesses, our local ministries, or otherwise, and then we connect from region to region, I really feel like this is this storehouse vision of what God is saying for the days ahead. So thank you for sharing that. Anybody else want to bring their own testimony of that or otherwise, or even question like these ideas? Go for it. Who would like to go next? Jackie.
Um, yeah, I don't know if I'm gonna make a statement or a question.
All
I
right.
think
We,
during COVID, ministries were affected. I think what they received was less money during that time. I don't know if I'm right, but I felt, or local churches and ministries, yeah. So I think that was, for me, that was a warning from the Lord uh, to begin running his kingdom, his business in a different way. Um, yeah, I- that's my
COVID was a
perspective. Is
warning
that
for you.
yeah, I think it was a warning. I understood as a warning for everybody, but
Yep.
also for the church to begin doing things differently. And I don't think many understood. Unfortunately, the way I see things being run nowadays, I think the message was not understood. But I think it was like a warning from the Lord to the world and also to the believers.
Thank you. Diane, I saw that you unmuted. You want to share perspective or ask a question or share a testimony?
Um, I'm sorry, Greg. We a bunch of us got the wrong link for our Wednesday morning ICC meeting, and we just popped in, so I honestly didn't hear the message,
No
and I
problem.
apologize.
Not at all. Yeah, so our discussion this morning is about what's going on in the stock market currently. There's been this downturn, and we're talking about what is God saying about potentially taking resources off the table in these global financial markets and putting it into the kingdom of God, putting it into a local form of economy. So that's the nature of the discussion this morning. I know from last night's discussion, you were excited about, I think you called it the economy of love, but I don't know if you want to share anything more about that.
Um, yeah, the idea behind what me and a couple of other people have been working on, the same idea you're working on, is about excess value created in love. And so when you do things in a loving way and in a loving nature, that you're not motivated by money, you're motivated by helping people and loving on people, that it creates an excess value that will be returned, maybe, eternally, obviously, but also it tends to return financially and physically as well, because people see your heart in that, and it tends to create an excess value that you can
Cool.
trade upon.
Yeah. So, presuming God is the redeemer of the excess value, you're saying that there's the idea of eternal reward or treasures in heaven, but there's also the idea that God waters those who water others and helps us and blesses us and increases us when we're obedient to love what he loves and hate what he hates. Is that fair?
Yes.
That's really
I've
neat. So where are you guys based out of?
well, we're kind of all over the place. I'm in Florida. We met on a we met on a Christian network, and so I'm in Florida. The founder is in Tennessee, and the other gentleman that we work with is actually outside of Atlanta. Um, and I was after last night's meeting, I was looking at your website, and I was looking at. I didn't have time to go through all the videos because I just found it last night. But I did go through most of the tabs and checked it out, and it's very similar to. In fact, it's nearly identical to what you're doing, and it's just really cool. I see God knitting us all together. And what came to me last night after I was looking at it, I was laying in bed and I was trying to fall asleep and I couldn't. That's why I got up and looked at your website. But the idea is that God's the vine, right? And we're the
Yeah.
branches. And when we remain in Him, we're all knit together, right? Because we're knit together through Him, right? So God is our source, and when we see multiple platforms, so we also found another platform that is doing another thing that is very, very similar to what you're talking about, what we're talking about, and you can see it's all coming from the same source, right?
The Holy
And I
Spirit.
believe, right, and I believe God's knitting us all together because why do separate efforts, right? When we can all come together and do it together, right?
Yeah. That's we talk about the storehouse network. You could choose your terminology, whatever it is.
Yep.
It's like that. We have to work together and bring the nets together for God's purposes and his glory.
It's just so amazing
What's the
and
name of
humbling.
that group, your folks that you're talking
Um,
about? Is there a
well,
name? Is there
the
a website there or?
um, economics of love is the concept, and then we're under an umbrella called New Maxim, where that would be a consultancy where we help new Christian businesses get off the ground for free. Basically, help them set up and establish all their systems, all their processes, literally help them get off the ground, and then um, ask for, basically a very small profit share at the end, and only if they want to. It's not required.
Volunteer. That's great because
um,
that's what we're talking about. The giving and receiving is different than contractual obligations. I get a piece
right.
of your hide if I help set you up, and you'll be paying me forever for that. It's like when the Pilgrims came over, they made a deal like that wasn't the best, and they had to slave away in order to repay that as part of their deal. So it's great to hear more about that. Is there a website for that?
I was just going to paste it in the chat.
Great. Appreciate
And
that.
that's just the executive summary for the economics of love and I can't take credit for it. It was, Rick and Chris put it together. And I met them around this time last year. But like I said, God just kind of knit us together because literally when they showed me this and then they showed me their systems and stuff like that, I started bawling because it was literally the embodiment of the vision God had given me 2 years prior, and I had drawn an outline. But I'm I'm a realtor, but I haven't gone to school for business. I've never done it. I've never. I didn't know. God gave me a vision, and I didn't know where to go with it. Um, and these guys have kind of been helping me, and so and I've been helping them. So we've kind of formed a little group, and part of the vision that God gave me was for affordable housing
Yeah.
um, that isn't just affordable housing. It's also being delivered and set free and breaking the poverty cycle and the homelessness cycle, right?
Thank
And
you.
that's another thing that God provided ideas through them. So we're working on a for-profit model that so it'll be self-sustaining, a for-profit model for affordable housing.
Cool. We have had a lot of initiatives and discussions that are like that. I'm going to put some of those in the chat, but one that comes to mind is a place called Mission Grove, which is down in Texas. That a huge Christian organization called JAMA bought a campus. It was the old Keith Green campus or Teen Mania campus. It was like a 300-acre campus down even where David Wilkerson used to have part of his ministry, Times Square Church. Teen Challenge was down there at one point. So out of that land that they acquired for a greater ministry, they carved out a piece of that land and created affordable housing. And their vision was to have people who were foreign missionaries, like Eric was talking about earlier, who have spent even their lives out in the field living for Jesus, spreading the gospel. As they get older, they have no resources in the stock market. They don't have a retirement account. They don't have ways of provision. So they put this initiative together to help them and provide affordable housing to returning foreign missionaries to honor them and to love them within their community. So that was an example. It's a fellow by the name of Joel Frazier who works on what he calls the sanctuary space, which is a way that people can address homelessness in their towns and cities, building smaller facilities on their own property to be able to house people. So anyway, but just thank you for sharing that, and just it just reminds me of a lot of the initiatives that I'll end up putting in this write up if anyone wants to check those out. Um, so great to hear about that. Thank you.
Where will that write-up be? Where can we access it?
Yeah. So on our website, what we do is we post all of these discussions as a recording.
Hmm.
We have notes that are accompany all of the recordings. And in the notes, we have all the links and the further connects to how you could research yourself more of what we're talking about
Very cool. Thank you, Greg.
anytime. Anybody else want to chime in the discussion or have a question about the markets? All right. So one of the other things I picked up on just recently was that if you remember going back to some of the risk that was in the markets last year in August, there was this issue of the Japanese yen and the correction that was related to the movement of the yen. So that led to this other article that I'm going to put into the write-up. I think it was in Bloomberg about global liquidity in the currency markets is much thinner than people think it is. So that gets to what Fulton was describing earlier, like, hey, instead of just investing in these markets without really understanding them and leaving it to the professionals who take a cut of the fees, let's take our money out of that system and let's put it back to work with people. One of the risks you've got today in those global markets that they're all connected, by the way. So just so we're aware, anytime there's an issue in the US or in Japan or in Europe, that affects the banking system and the financial markets, and therefore the nations, even the ability to borrow money to fund their government operations. So it's all as to say, we think of our local economy, or sorry, of our global economy today as resilient, how strong it is, how resilient it is. But the fact is, it's actually pretty fragile underneath it. And this kind of highlights that, like a lot of the automatic trading or what's known as stat arb or robo trading, where computers are literally trading faster than people are providing now what's called phantom liquidity instead of the function of the big, huge global banks used to provide, which is a depth of liquidity anytime currencies are traded with one another. Dollar to yen to Swiss franc to euro. These things, they're not as solid as they appear to be. So it's just another reminder of what matters. And what's really interesting about investing locally is you don't even need US dollars or whatever your local currency is in order to do it because you can do it in kind. Like there's a really interesting project here in the Northeast called Berkshares. And that's a play on shares like shares of stock, but what it really is a local currency. This is not even a Christian local currency, but it's an effort in Western Massachusetts to engender keeping money flowing inside of a regional economy instead of going back into the global context or the US context. And it's basically addressing like the issue of how do we reinvest locally and not just depend on everything externally being imported in order to supply our basic needs. So the idea of that local currency is let's keep it at home. If we can buy a product from our neighbor instead of China, would we do that? If we can get our food locally grown instead of imported from Mexico, would we consider that? And their local currency called the Berkshires, that is an experiment of another currency. that currency can be converted into dollars. But the point is, like, they've demonstrated that they're actually operating amongst, I think they're up to 300 or 400 businesses working together, of how you can do it even without the almighty dollar, or even without the currency of the nation or the nations. You can still have economy and build by doing it in tangible measures. So I don't know if anybody's has a testimony about that or an experience with that, but that's a reality. That's like not just a fantasy. That's not just a, well, maybe it could be done in some ideal, dynamic. It's real. We can actually do that. We can, when we have a sustainable network of people working together with other people, you don't even need the nation's currency in order to function. So
That's what I've been doing with private digital currencies, and the ability to exchange those private digital currencies, the between individuals, businesses, or even just purchasing something at on Amazon, at Walmart, at the gas station, or a restaurant, and so consequently, as I'm completely opposed to central bank digital currencies, which are managed by central banks, the whole concept of private digital currency was a decentralization of currencies so that central banks couldn't control it, which is why they wanted to have central bank digital currency so they could control it. But whether a country chooses to go with a central bank digital currency, which would be bad, or private digital currency, which, would prevent that centralization and that control, we're moving towards that digital environment, whether we like it or not. It's like AI, whether you're comfortable with it or you're not comfortable with it. We're moving towards it, and you've opened up that gate and that door, and now you have to figure out, how do you manage that, and how do you deal with that? And as people who are standing on the wall watching all of these things coming towards us, as we're all to be as believers, we have to be men and women who understand the times. And even if we aren't an expert in it, we have to have some understanding of it. Because what's going to happen when these things begin to move very quickly, which they are, we're going to have to know what to do. But the people that look to us are going to say, what do we do? And we are going to need to be in a position to somehow respond to that question. So I think that decentralization needs to occur, and does Russia not have the same kind of central bank as the rest of the world? Yes. Does it's not owned by the same people that own everything else. And Argentina is battling their central bank, and I believe the U.S. is eventually getting rid of their central bank. But the central banks are a controls aspect, and no and those who are in control don't, of course, want to release that control. So I think that we're moving towards that. And one of the things that Trump has done is he chose four digital currencies that he is now going to invest a substantial part of the treasury of our U.S. treasuries in those, or not invest so much as hold those treasuries in the form of those four different cryptocurrencies, private cryptocurrencies. So we're moving in that direction. And so when you see something moving, it's like a tornado. You watch it move. It's going to set down where it sets down. You can't control it, but the fact that you can at least watch it allows you to be somewhat prepared and ready as it continues to move in that direction.
yeah, so this is an often discussed aspect of things. Like, what about crypto? I for one, just for anyone who is new to the new breed of business, I really feel like what the Lord is saying is it all has to be relational. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a technology, and the blockchain technology is actually is an interesting way of accounting and recording transactions. I think there has a lot of validity. I think where we run into trouble is cryptocurrencies have been created in the same fear and greed system of how they're traded, and people have really gotten carried away with the valuation, which is based on nothing. So that's the issue. What we're are the God's economy, I think, operates with people and working together with other people. It can have a technology that's associated with it, but if it becomes technology focus dependent primary reason, or people's greed gets injected into the middle of that, watch out, because all we're doing is we're replicating the same sins and issues that our central bank global currency systems already are intertwined with. And so the idea, I think, of God's economy from a storehouse vision perspective is, whether we got the technology or we don't, we have people working together with other people. And technology is awesome and it can help be more productive, but it can also be a trap, a black box. I don't understand it. And other bad actors can basically get in there and have their way with it. So I think that's critical in looking at it from God's perspective.
One thing too, that I mean, the problem that you have with money is it's governed by the world. Now, we get to steward some of it, but Jesus said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. And so Jesus didn't consider the coin that came out of the fish's mouth his, or when he was confronted with, taxes and all. And I'm sure he wasn't pleased with the way Caesar was using that tax money. But the bottom line is, you know, if we participate in any degree, whether we use, the fiat currencies that have no value either, or we use the digital currency, or we use gold and silver, or we use whatever it is we use, it's still it's a currency that has some type of agreed upon, amount. And so, I mean, you look in your wallet, what's on the back of a dollar? We're not real pleased the fact that they have the, Illuminati pyramid on the back of the dollar and the all-seeing eye, and that's a bummer, but that's there. And I would prefer it wasn't there, but it is there. Yet we keep all this in our wallet and we use it on a daily basis. So to me, I've always looked at cryptocurrency not as an investment, but as a means of transaction. And in at least what I've kind of been led to do is I put, my cash reserves in precious metals, in digital currency, in cash that I'm keeping at home. And the digital currency that I have 95% of what I have in is called stablecoin. Stablecoin isn't the name of a coin. It's a name of a group of coins, which basically earns interest. So that it's just really a digital savings account. It doesn't go up in value like the rest of the cryptocurrencies on the crypto markets, but it changes value no different than the dollar changes value against the Canadian dollar or the euro or the yen. And so consequently, again, we all have to come to terms, with whatever we feel God led to do. But the unfortunate thing is the economy is a Babylonian economy, and we have to wisely participate in it to the degree we believe we're supposed to, and then how we're supposed to.
Yeah, I think that's the key, is keeping in mind the way Jesus operated. Remember, not only was there the miracle of the temple tax coin that you mentioned and render to Caesar what is Caesar's, there also was the fact that they had a money box. Judas was the treasurer. So they had money in their discipleship movement. But the thing was, Jesus didn't trust in it, didn't depend on it. In fact, there's all these examples where he didn't use the money in order to accomplish his work. So I think that's the key, is whatever the money is, whether we created a currency, whether we're using a US currency, a Babylonian currency, the question is, do we trust in it? Have we put our stock in it, our faith in it? Or do we use it as a tool and it's not the funnel that everything has to go through? So I think that's one of the heart tests that we can all look at things, is like, if I run out of money, am I going to die? Is it the what would be called in project planning the critical path to doing anything, even for God? Part of my journey was like in having no money, God saying, Greg, you've got to realize, even as a Wall Street guy, I can do things with money or without money. And it just opened my eyes to up to these possibilities. And I think that's something we all should, look at, wrestle with. And whenever we create a local economy and we're trying to get Christian community to work together, we have to keep those principles in mind. We have to keep what Jesus taught us at the forefront. Otherwise, what can happen is those Babylonian spirits can sweep in and it can create all sorts of trouble inside of the community. So thank you.
I
Diane,
personally think,
go ahead.
I'm so I guess I kind of see the God's economy, the storehouse economy, almost like a bartering system. Um, and but if you look even in examples in the world today, the businesses that people are involved in, especially service industry businesses, the people that actually care about their customers and put their customers ahead of profit are the ones that far exceed all of the other businesses. And and that's where God's economy comes in, right? Where we're caring for other people, where we're putting their needs ahead of our own. And that just returns in volumes, because when people know that you care for them, then they tell other people and they tell other people, because they know that they can trust you. They know that they can count on you. They know that you're going to put their needs ahead of your own. And while that's not a bartering system per se, it is a form of bartering. It is a form of, you know, value exchange. I value you more than I value me, and that's just biblical, right? That's just biblical, is to
Love
put
and
others
serve one
ahead.
another. Yeah.
Yep.
To a new commandment I've given you, Jesus said, to love one another as I have loved you, which is a sacrificial love. Jesus, when he died on the cross, didn't say, well, I'll do it if you give your life to me. It was a one-way situation. So, yeah, you're right. It's a bartering and it's an exchange of value, but also in there, and this is really an interesting economic point, there's this circuit breaker of faith, which is to say, I'm willing to give you, even if you don't promise me you're going to give back to me. It's kind of like you were saying that the sharing of the profits is a voluntary thing. I think that's actually biblical. I think that's what Jesus is talking about when he says, if someone is in need and wants to borrow money, freely lend it to them, but don't necessarily expect to be repaid, because your reward in heaven will be great if even you have the opportunity to forgive that loan. And then the person borrowing it has another trusting in God, which is, hey, don't ask to borrow money if you never intend to repay it. That's wickedness. That's in Proverbs. So here's this asymmetry of two things happening at the same time. And it's like, I can give and trust God in this, and you can receive it and pay me back. But if you don't, I'm not going to count it against you and work against you to try to recover my money. I'm going to be happy with what God will do in general to make it up to us if need be. And I think that's that idea of the idea of buying and selling is, I have a price, you have a product, let's find the place where we meet and we exchange. God's economy is, I'm trusting God and I'm going to serve the people in my community at the restaurant even better than I might serve myself, because that's what Jesus would do. He would go the extra mile, he would serve you, he would not expect anything in return. And so then you, on the other side of that, can respond. And if you don't, I'm not going to fail, die, not be able to survive, because God's my provider. So God's in the middle with the two people instead of it being two people just one to one. And so when we are doing the economy of giving and receiving, we're willing to not focus on ourselves in order to help somebody else. And if they get an excess benefit, that's okay. That's not the end of our world, because we're not trusting in the direct contractual benefit. We're trusting God. So anyway, hopefully that helps the discussion and understanding that a little bit more. It's like giving and receiving has God in the middle. Buying and selling can take God out of it, where it's just like, hey, it's just money. We're buying, we're selling, and God doesn't matter in that because we're just doing supply and demand here.
I have a similar story to yours, Greg. For the last year, I have my husband and I have literally been living by the grace and the providence of God. My husband lost his job. I had a very tumultuous year last year with several things going on in my business and my personal life. And we haven't had a literal paycheck come in for a year, but yet our bills have been paid. We've had food on the table. Our community has come around us and cared for us. And literally checks have appeared in the mail that we had no idea where they were coming from or that they were coming. And so that's a similar experience to what you were speaking about, trusting in God and not in money, right? And when we have that mindset, and when we know that everything comes from Him, and we don't worry or have anxiety of how we're going to eat tomorrow, and we just trust in Him, He will provide, even though we can't see how it's coming.
Amen. And it's real. Like God will show up in surprising ways because we've been without a quote paycheck, at least any kind of paycheck like my old paychecks, for over 10 years. And in trusting God, He opens up avenues of provision that we never expected. It was like God was saying to us, like, I got to teach you new tricks. Like, I can do it, Greg, with or without the money. You just have to follow me. I'll make a way. So it sounds like you've experienced that too. And it's scary in our culture because our culture says if you run out of money, you're dead. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, you're just gonna be homeless. You're gonna have nothing. And that is not what Jesus taught. He taught something very different, which is don't put your trust in money, put your trust in me. And if you're seeking first the kingdom and righteousness, I'll take care of you. I will add it unto you. I see your needs. But Jesus also said, when I return, will I find faith on the earth? And I think this is part of our wrestling match is will we have that kind of faith, which is likened to we can't take any of our provision with us when we die. All are appointed once to die. We trust God with our lives and our resurrection and salvation. How much more can we trust Him in this life? And I think it's a very real thing. It's God shows up in mysterious ways, amazing ways. He wants us to trust Him in a deeper way. I think that's really a part of it. It's a part of God's economy is like learning that faith, trust, walk. Like in the Bible, we saw Peter walking on the water. That's an impossibility. Who walks on water? Yet he had the faith to step out of the boat. So I think in many ways, God is asking us, will you have the faith to step out of the boat and trust me, even if you don't have the money to back you up? Thanks for sharing that.
My pleasure.
All right, we're at 5 minutes to the top of the hour, getting ready to wrap up. But anybody else have any reflections, closing prayer, other testimonies, questions? We still have time for a question. What do you think? Right. Well, maybe what I could do here is ask somebody to close us in prayer. Diane, since we've had a meeting of the hearts here over the past couple of days, would you mind closing us in prayer today?
Certainly, I would love to.
Thank you.
Heavenly Father, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for knitting us together in you, Lord. Thank you for your Holy Spirit, Father. I ask that you fill us today, Father, that you would um, renew, refresh, and restore our minds, our hearts, and our spirits, and bring us into alignment with you and your will today, Lord. Lord, I ask that you go with us, you go before us, you hem us in and behind, as your word says, Lord, that you would just give us wisdom and revelation of you right there with us, Lord, everywhere we go, in everything that we do, Father, and that you would break our hearts for what breaks yours, Lord, that you would give us words of wisdom and knowledge to speak to the hearts of those that we encounter today, Lord, so that we can speak your heart of love and your message of love to them, Lord, and reflect your light. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Lord, may you be glorified throughout the earth. Hey, thanks everybody for being a part of this discussion today. Feel free to invite anybody else you'd like to. Just reach out to me and have a great week. God bless you guys.
God bless you. Have a blessed
God
day.
bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for
Thank
participating.
you so much. Bless you.